The sun had scorched the Arizona plains into a furnace of dust and shimmering heat, the kind that burned the skin and dried the soul. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Tessa Crowe could see nothing but endless red earth stretching in every direction. What was once a neat blue traveling dress now clung to her frame in tatters streaked with blood and sand. Her golden hair, once pinned in the manner of Boston teachers, fell loose around her face, tangled by 3 days of captivity and the desert wind. Ahead of her rode Nakai, the Apache war chief, who had taken her prisoner. His silhouette rose against the fading sun, like something carved from the desert itself, tall, broad-shouldered, unyielding. The other riders kept their distance, their movements precise, like wolves that needed no words to hunt. But Nakai stayed close, keeping his horse steady, so that his captive didn't collapse before they reached wherever he intended to take her. Tessa dared to study him when he wasn't looking. His copper-toned skin glistened with sweat, the muscles across his back rippling as he guided the reins. Long black hair streaked with dust and tied with an eagle feather brushed against his bare shoulders. Paint and ash traced patterns down his chest marks of a man whose authority ran deeper than fear. A knife and tomahawk hung at his waist, the same weapons she'd seen flash under moonlight when he led the Iron Riders against her wagon train. 3 days earlier, Tessa had been bound for California with the Franklin settlers, fleeing the grief that clung to her since Elias Boone, her fiancé, had died of fever before their wedding. She'd carried nothing west but a satchel of books, her faith, and the fragile hope that teaching in a small frontier town might let her start again. That hope now lay buried with the rest of her traveling party somewhere behind them in the scorched sand. Her lips cracked as she croaked water, barely a whisper. Nakai turned his head with a motion as deliberate as a hawk's. Without a word, he took the water skin from his belt and passed it back to her. Their fingers brushed brief, accidental, but the contact jolted her more than the desert heat. "Drink little," he ordered, his English rough but clear. "Long way still." She obeyed, sipping carefully. The water was warm, tasting of leather and smoke, yet it might as well have been life itself. When she handed it back, she gathered her courage. "Why keep me alive?" she asked hoarsely. "Why not kill me like the others?" His eyes, dark as obsidian, narrowed slightly. White woman. Hair like gold. A pause. Rare. Worth many horses. Maybe wife for chief. Fear clawed at her throat. "I would rather die," she whispered, trembling but defiant. To her surprise, Nakai laughed, a deep, resonant sound that rolled across the open desert like thunder before rain. "Brave words," he said, almost amused. "Save your strength. You'll need it soon." By nightfall, they crested a ridge overlooking a hidden valley. The Apache camp lay below its wickiups, glowing faintly from firelight, dozens of dome-shaped shelters made from hides and willow branches. Women moved like shadows, tending flames. Children darted through the dusk. Dogs barked in welcome. Yet the air carried tension, not celebration. As they entered, a gray-haired woman rushed forward, her face lined with worry. She spoke to Nakai in rapid Apache, gesturing toward a large wickiup. The change in him was instant. His calm cracked, replaced by raw urgency. He dismounted without a word and strode toward the dwelling, leaving Tessa tied to her saddle. A younger warrior yanked her down roughly. Her legs, numb from riding, gave way, and she hit the ground hard. He barked something she couldn't understand, dragged her by the arm, and shoved her into a small shelter at the edge of the camp. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and hides. He cut the bindings at her wrists but fastened a rope around her ankle, tethering her to the center post before leaving. Tessa sank onto the furs, shaking. Tears came silently, hot and helpless. Sleep eventually claimed her uneasy broken. Then came the sound that tore the night apart. A baby's cry, sharp, relentless, desperate. It pierced the darkness, rising and falling with no end. Hours passed. The wailing continued. Murmurs moved through the camp, tense and frantic. And still that child cried. Just before dawn, the hide flap was thrown open. Tessa squinted at the sudden light. Nakai stood there, his face drawn with exhaustion and something far more human desperation. In his arms, a small bundle writhed the source of the heartbreaking cries. "My son," he said, his voice thick. 3 days, no sleep, no food. The infant's face was flushed, his tiny fists trembling. His mother Tessa asked softly. "Gone," Nakai said after a pause. "Died giving him life. No woman's milk now." He sank to one knee beside her, the child wailing between them. "I saw you with settler children," he continued, eyes locked on hers. "Gentle hands. Maybe good heart." "I don't understand what you want," she whispered, though deep down she did. "You help my son," he said simply. "White women know medicine. No tricks for sick babies." Tessa looked at the child, then at the warrior who held him so fierce, yet utterly undone by fear for his son. "I'm not a mother," she murmured, trembling. "I've never had a child." "You help?" He repeated, voice low but sharp as flint. "Or both die him first, then you." Her heart pounded. Slowly she lifted her arms. "Let me hold him." Nakai hesitated, surprise flickering across his features, then carefully placed the baby in her arms. The child was fever-hot, his tiny body trembling. Tessa cradled him close, humming a lullaby she hadn't sung since Boston. "He needs cool water, something for the fever," she murmured, instinct guiding her words. "Do you have willow bark?" "It can help." Nakai nodded once. "We have." As she rocked the baby, Kale, though she did not yet know his name, the crying softened. His breathing steadied, if only a little. Tessa looked up at the war chief. "He'll live," she whispered, though she couldn't know for sure. Nakai's gaze lingered on her wary, conflicted, grateful. "If my son lives, no harm will come to you," he said solemnly. "By the spirits of my fathers, I swear it." And for the first time since the desert swallowed her world, Tessa Crowe felt something other than fear. It wasn't safety, not yet, but the faintest pulse of hope in a place where there should have been none. Tessa's voice trembled. I'm not a mother. I've never had a child." Nakai's jaw tightened, his expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. "You help," he said again, his tone edged with command. "If not, both die. Him first, then you." The unfinished threat hung heavy in the still air. Swallowing her fear, Tessa slowly extended her arms. "Please, let me try." Something flickered across Nakai's face. Hesitation, surprise, before he carefully placed his burning, wailing son into her waiting arms. The child's tiny body was hot to the touch, his cries hoarse with exhaustion. "He needs cool water," she murmured, instinct taking over before her mind could catch up. "And clean cloths for the fever." "Do you have willow bark?" "It helps bring the heat down." Nakai's dark eyes studied her for a long moment before he nodded. "We have. I bring." As he stepped back, Tessa drew the baby close to her chest, humming a trembling lullaby from her childhood. The melody was soft, fragile, carried more by hope than by voice. Slowly, the baby's cries softened into uneven whimpers. "What's his name?" she asked quietly. Kael Nakai replied, "Means mischief." A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips, just for a heartbeat before grief reclaimed them. Like his mother, he added under his breath. For a moment, his warrior's mask fell away, revealing not a conqueror, but a man hollowed by loss. Then he straightened, stoic once more. "I bring what you need," he said, rising to his full height. At the door, he paused and looked back. "You help my son live, Tessa Crowe, and by the spirits of my fathers, no harm will come to you while I breathe." His words struck her like a promise carved in stone. She hadn't known he even remembered her name. Before she could reply, he was gone, leaving her alone with the feverish child and the first fragile spark of purpose she'd felt since the desert took everything. She brushed a trembling hand across Kael's flushed cheek. "Shh, little one," she whispered. "I'll help you if I can." The baby's dark eyes fluttered open wide and deep like his father's, as if he somehow understood. "You're safe now," she murmured. In that quiet corner of the Apache camp, with dawn spilling its first light over the desert, something began to change, something neither captivity nor fear could touch. Not long after, Nakai returned with an elderly woman, whose face was lined by years of wind and wisdom. "This Sani," he said simply. "Medicine woman." Sani eyed Tessa with open suspicion, but wasted no time mixing herbs into a clay bowl. Together they cooled Kael's fevered skin, wiping him with strips of damp cloth, while Nakai watched from the shadows, his gaze softer than before, though still guarded. When Kael finally drifted into an exhausted sleep, his breathing calm, at last, Tessa dared a smile. "He's resting now. The fever's weaker." Nakai knelt beside her, his hand gentle as it brushed his son's cheek. "You have strong medicine," he said, repeating his words from before, but this time there was gratitude in them. "My people say Mother Sky touches those who heal." Tessa shook her head. "Not medicine," she said softly. "Just care." Something shifted in his eyes, then a recognition, quiet but undeniable. For that moment, they were no longer captor and captive, Apache and settler, but simply two souls bound by the same heartbeat of compassion. The moment broke when Sani spoke sharply to Nakai in Apache. He answered in kind, then turned to Tessa. "You stay with Kael," he ordered. "Sani guard. I speak with counsel." And he was gone again, leaving Tessa with the sleeping child. She looked down at the boy's tiny face and whispered, "Live, little one, for both our sakes." 3 days passed. Kael's fever broke. The flush faded from his cheeks, replaced by the healthy glow of life. Tessa bathed him in cool water, laughing softly when he splashed her in return. "You're stronger, aren't you, little warrior?" she cooed, drying him with a soft deerskin cloth. He gurgled back, dark eyes fixed on her face with a look that made her chest tighten. When Nakai entered, ducking beneath the hide flap, the small space seemed to shrink around him. "He is better?" he asked, kneeling beside them. "Much," Tessa said, unable to hide her pride. "The fever broke in the night. He took goat's milk with broth this morning and kept it down." Relief flickered across Nakai's face. His roughened hand brushed over Kael's cheek with the tenderness of a man who'd nearly lost everything. "You've been touched by Mother Sky," he said, voice low. Tessa smiled faintly. "No," she whispered. "Just a woman doing what's right for a child." He studied her, then really studied her, as if trying to understand why she'd helped when she had every reason not to. Why, he asked finally, "We took you. Killed your people. Why save my son?" Tessa looked down at Kael, who stirred softly in her arms. "Because he's innocent," she said. He doesn't deserve to pay for the sins of grown men." Nakai said nothing, but the look in his eyes, half wonder, half sorrow, spoke more than any words ever could. Tessa had told herself she should hate him, hate all of them, but when faced with the raw cry of a child, she couldn't hold on to bitterness. "He's done nothing wrong," she said softly. "Kyle is just a baby who needs someone to care for him. I couldn't let him suffer." Nakai studied her quietly, as though he could see past her words into something buried deep within her. After a long silence, he gave a slow nod. "Today," he said, rising to his feet, "you come. See more than these walls." She blinked, unsure she'd heard right. "You're letting me out." The corner of his mouth lifted a faint trace of humor. "Not letting you escape," he said. "Letting you see." Under Sani's sharp-eyed instruction, Tessa learned to fasten Kyle into a cradle board, wrapping him in soft deerskin. Together they stepped out into the blazing Arizona sunlight. The brightness stung her eyes after so many days in the dim shelter. The Apache village spread out before her, alive, intricate, and human. Women pounded corn between stones, stretched hides across wooden frames, and mended clothing with bone needles. Smoke drifted upward from cooking fires. Children darted through the dust, their laughter echoing between the wickiups as they practiced with miniature bows and toy spears. Young warriors trained nearby, their movements fluid and fierce. Everywhere she looked, life pulsed through the camp. Yet as she walked beside Nakai, Tessa felt the weight of stares pressing against her back. Some faces, mostly older men and women, hardened with suspicion. Others, younger and more curious, only watched in silence. "They fear me," she whispered. "Not fear," Nakai corrected. "Caution. White eyes bring death to Apache, for many seasons." "And Apache bring death to settlers," Tessa replied, before she could stop herself. Her heart stilled, waiting for anger. Instead, Nakai's expression shifted into something like respect. "You speak truth," he said simply. "Blood flows both ways." He gestured toward the children playing nearby. "We fight for them, for the ones who will come after us. White man takes our land, kills our food, drives us where nothing grows." For the first time, Tessa saw what the newspapers back east had never shown: families' culture, pride, all shaped by survival. The savages they wrote about were people fighting not out of cruelty, but to exist. "This is our home." Nakai continued as they reached the camp's edge. His gaze swept the horizon. "For now. But the army comes closer every day." They climbed a ridge overlooking the valley. The land stretched for miles, sun-baked, and brutal mountains shivering faintly in the distance. Nakai lifted his hand toward a faint dust cloud crawling across the horizon. "Scouts," he said. 2 days. Maybe 3. Tessa's heart leapt. Soldiers meant safety, rescue, a way back to her own people. But the thought twisted with guilt. What would happen to Kyle if she left? What of Nakai? He turned toward her, reading the conflict on her face. "You think they come for you?" "I don't know," she admitted. "They couldn't know I survived." "They come to kill Apache," Nakai said grimly. "Not to save a white woman." His gaze lingered on the distant dust. "We leave before they find us." "You're taking me with you. Kyle needs you," he answered simply, as if no other reason mattered. For a moment silence hung between them, heavy as the desert air. Kyle stirred in his cradleboard, fussing softly. Without thinking, Tessa reached for him, cradling the child against her chest. He quieted immediately. "He knows you now," Nakai said quietly. "He trusts you." "I've grown fond of him too," Tessa admitted, brushing a finger over Kyle's smooth cheek. As they walked back toward camp, laughter rippled nearby. A group of women were preparing the evening meal, and one younger woman called out something sharp in Apache, her tone mocking. The others laughed, eyes cutting toward Tessa. Nakai's response came like a whip, short, hard, final. The laughter died instantly. The younger woman's glare lingered full of venom. "What did she say?" Tessa asked. Nakai hesitated, then sighed. "She said I dishonor my wife's memory, letting a white woman hold my son." Heat rose to Tessa's cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I never meant to offend." "You saved my son's life," Nakai replied, voice firm. "There is no dishonor in that." Back in his wiki-up, Tessa laid Kale down and turned to find Nakai watching her again, his expression unreadable. The fading light painted his copper skin in shades of fire and shadow. "What will happen to me?" she asked quietly. "When we leave, will I ever go back to my people?" He stepped closer, his movements careful, almost reverent. "You are safe with me," he said in a low voice. "That isn't what I asked." She pressed her pulse, quickening. "The future," he said softly, "is like smoke. Try to hold it, and it slips through your fingers." Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, something deeper than fear, older than words. "Nakai," she whispered, unsure if it was a plea or a warning. He lifted a hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, tracing lightly along her jaw. "Golden woman," he murmured the name the others had given her. His touch lingered gentle, but full of something dangerous and real, something that neither captivity nor difference could erase. "You should fear me, hate me." "I did," Tessa Crowe admitted softly. "At first. But now—" Before she could finish, shouts erupted outside. Nakai tensed his body, coiling like a mountain cat. In one swift motion, he reached for the knife at his belt. "Stay with Kyle," he ordered sharply, before disappearing through the hide flap. Tessa's heart thundered as she clutched the sleeping child to her chest. The muffled chaos outside grew louder, voices running feet the low bark of commands in Apache. Every second stretched thin until the flap was thrown aside and Nakai reappeared, his face set in grim lines. "What is it?" she asked, tightening her hold on Kyle. "The army," he said. "They move faster than I thought. We ride tonight." The camp exploded into motion, controlled, practiced, efficient. Men tore down wiki-ups, women packed what they could carry. Children gathered behind the horses. Smoke and dust filled the air. The young woman who had mocked Tessa days earlier approached, arms outstretched. "I take," she said stiffly, her tone sharp. It wasn't a request. Reluctantly, Tessa surrendered the child. Kyle immediately began to cry. The woman spoke to him in Apache, but his cries only grew louder. Nakai appeared leading a dappled mare. "You ride," he said, helping Tessa into the saddle. "Stay close." "Where are we going?" she asked, adjusting her torn skirt. "North," he replied, mounting with fluid grace. "To the mountains. Army horses can't follow there." The iron riders moved out beneath a moonless sky, their shapes ghostly in the dust. Tessa rode near the front beside Nakai. Behind them, Kyle's wailing carried through the night like a wounded spirit. After nearly an hour, Nakai raised his hand, signaling a halt. He dismounted and strode toward the young woman carrying Kyle. Without a word, he took the cradleboard from her arms and brought it back to Tessa. "He wants you," he said simply. The moment Kale was pressed against her chest, the crying faded to soft hiccups, then quiet gurgles as she whispered to him. The young Apache woman glared before jerking her horse away. "She doesn't like me," Tessa murmured. Her name is Lani, Nakai said. She was to be my wife. After Sari died, she thought she would raise Kale as her own. Tessa's breath caught. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Lani is the daughter of a brave warrior, he said, his voice low. A good match for a chief. But her heart is hard. Not good for a child who has already lost his mother. They rode in silence after that, the desert wind biting at their faces. When the chill deepened, Nakai pulled a buffalo robe from his saddlebag and draped it around her shoulders. His fingers brushed the nape of her neck, lingering for just a moment before he turned away. By dawn, the company reached the foothills of a rugged range. Nakai led them into a narrow canyon where a thin stream trickled through stone. It was a hidden place, quiet and secure. The tribe moved with practiced silence, setting up temporary shelters. Tessa was given a small lean-to of branches and hides. Exhausted, she laid Kyle down on soft furs and collapsed beside him asleep before she could exhale. When she woke, she felt eyes on her. Nakai crouched at the entrance, his gaze steady, unreadable. The soldiers she asked, pushing tangled hair from her face. Gone wrong way, he said, satisfaction in his tone. We are safe. For now. He stepped inside, settling cross-legged across from her. In his hands was a bundle wrapped in soft deerskin. For you, he said, offering it out. A chief's son's caretaker cannot wear rags. Tessa unfolded the bundle. Inside lay a dress of pale buckskin, the beadwork along the bodice shimmering like desert light with moccasins and a bone comb nestled beside it. It's beautiful, she whispered. But I can't accept. It was Ceres, Nakai interrupted gently. His voice caught. She would want it used, not buried. The meaning hit Tessa hard. This was more than kindness, it was trust, respect, something unspoken growing between them. I'll wear it with honor, she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat the air felt heavy with everything left unsaid. Nakai reached out, brushing a loose strand of her golden hair away from her face. Golden woman, he murmured the name others in camp had given her. You bring light where there was none. His fingers lingered, tracing down her cheek. Her breath hitched as he leaned closer, his intent written in the dark fire of his gaze. Nakai, she whispered, not a protest but a question trembling on her lips. His mouth found hers with unexpected tenderness, hesitant, reverent. It was not the kiss of a conqueror, but of a man crossing a line he had sworn never to approach. And though every reason told her to resist the blood, the loss, the divide, Tessa's hand rose, resting against his chest, her heart answering what her voice could not. In that fragile dawn, nothing else existed, only the quiet ache between Tessa Crowe and Nakai, the unspoken understanding that something irreversible had begun. It was a bond neither had sought, yet both felt down to the bone as dangerous as it was undeniable. Outside, the canyon walls glowed amber under the first light of day, and for the first time in a long while, the desert seemed to hold a kind of promise. 2 weeks passed in that hidden canyon, a brief sanctuary carved out of the Arizona wilderness. Beneath the whisper of pine trees and the steady murmur of the stream, the iron riders rested their weary horses grazing along the banks. For Tessa, those days changed everything. She knelt by the shallow water's edge, bathing Kyle, whose laughter echoed through the canyon like sunlight on stone. The boy splashed and kicked, dark eyes gleaming with mischief true to his name. Careful, little warrior, Tessa teased, laughing, as cool droplets hit her face. You'll soak us both. She wore the buckskin dress Nakai had given her Seri's dress. The soft hide fit her comfortably, now the beadwork glinting in the sun, as though it belonged to her all along. Her once pale skin had bronzed under the desert sun. Her hands bore small calluses from camp work. The delicate schoolteacher from Boston was gone. What remained was a woman who could build a fire, calm, a crying child, and face the world with quiet strength. Though many still watched her with suspicion, her care for Kael had earned her reluctant respect. And Nakai, his presence had become both her comfort and her torment. Since that first dawn when his lips had found hers, something deep had taken root. He visited her often, bringing food, asking questions about her world, teaching her Apache words in return. At night, they sat by the fire, Kael asleep between them, the silence between their words as heavy and intimate as a promise neither dared to name. One morning, the sound of footsteps disturbed her peace. She turned, expecting Nakai, but found Lonnie instead. Lonnie Tessa greeted cautiously, lifting Kael from the water and wrapping him in a soft deerskin. The young Apache woman's beauty struck like a knife, strong, proud, adorned with a necklace of bear claws that marked her bloodline. "You wear a dead woman's clothes," Lonnie said in clipped English eyes, raking over Tessa's dress. "You hold her child. You take her place." Each word landed like a blow. Tessa drew herself up, clutching Kael close. "I care for him because he needs me, not because I want to replace anyone." Lonnie stepped closer, fingers brushing the knife at her waist. "Nakai is blinded by gold hair and white skin. When he sees clearly again, you will be nothing." Fear tightened Tessa's throat, but she met Lonnie's glare head-on. "That's for him to decide." For a tense heartbeat, Lonnie's hand hovered over her knife. Then with a hiss of disdain, she turned and vanished into the pines. Tessa exhaled shakily, hugging Kael tighter. The encounter had rattled her more than she wished to admit, but it also forced her to face the truth. What had grown between her and Nakai was more than duty or gratitude. It threatened the very order of this camp, and there would be consequences. Later that afternoon, while Kael napped, Tessa climbed the ridge above camp. The valley spread out below, golden and vast, stretching into the horizon, where her old life still existed somewhere beyond that haze of heat and memory. She didn't hear Nakai until he stood beside her, silent as shadow. His presence filled the space like part of the land itself. "You think of leaving," he said, not as a question, but as if he'd read her thoughts. Tessa hesitated, then nodded. "I was thinking about who I used to be, the woman who left Boston for a new beginning. She feels like a stranger to me now." For a long moment, Nakai said nothing. Then, his gaze still fixed on the horizon, he spoke quietly. "3 days' ride," he said. "There is an army fort. I could take you there." The offer struck her dumb. "You would let me go?" "Not let go." He corrected his voice, thick with something she couldn't name. "Give choice." When she turned, his face was open, honest, in a way that made her chest ache. "Apache, do not keep unwilling hearts." Her breath caught. "And if my heart is not unwilling?" Nakai's hand rose slowly, his calloused fingers brushing her cheek as gently as falling dust. "Then you stay," he murmured. "Be Kael's mother." His thumb traced the curve of her lower lip. "Be my wife." The words hung in the air like thunder about to break. To accept meant giving up everything: her country, her people, the life she'd once known. It meant standing on the edge between two worlds that would never understand each other. "And yet, my people would never accept me," she whispered. "Some will not," Nakai admitted. But others, in time, yes. Sani already calls you daughter when she thinks I do not hear. He looked at her, then dark eyes steady, fierce, full of conviction. I am chief, he said. My word can make peace, if your heart will meet mine halfway. And in the fading light as the canyon filled with the golden hush of sunset, Tessa realized that choice her freedom, her fate now rested in her own trembling hands. My choice will be respected, Tessa, Crowe said quietly. And what of Lonnie? A shadow crossed Nakai's face. She is proud and angry, but she will find her own path. His gaze softened, and his hand brushed her shoulder before sliding down to take her fingers in his. 3 days, he said. Think with an open heart. Then he turned and left her standing alone against the wide expanse of the desert, the golden light fading, the weight of an impossible choice pressing heavy on her chest. That night, a council fire burned in the heart of camp. The Apache gathered around it, their faces flickering in the light as the Iron Riders debated their next move. Word had come that Grant Redden's soldiers were drawing near. Tessa sat at the edge of the circle, Kale sleeping in her arms while Nakai stood and addressed his people. She couldn't understand most of the words, but she didn't need to. The tone of his voice carried command, the kind born not of fear, but of earned respect. The debate grew heated. Some urged retreat deeper into the mountains. Others wanted to scatter into smaller bands. Through it all, Nakai remained composed, listening before he spoke. But when Lonnie rose, her voice was sharp, cutting through the fire's crackle like a blade. Tessa didn't understand the Apache words yet. She felt the burn of Lonnie's glances, felt her name unspoken, but heavy ripple through the gathering. Nakai's reply came terse, controlled, but Lonnie pressed on her tone, rising with defiance. Around the fire, several warriors nodded in agreement. Beside Tessa, Sani leaned close, whispering in rough English, "She says you bring bad spirits, that the soldiers come because of you." Tessa's stomach dropped. She had feared this, that her presence would become the reason for their danger. Across the flames, Nakai stood speaking with measured power. His gestures pointed to Tessa, then to Kale in her arms, then to his own chest as if making a vow before all. When he finished, silence blanketed the fire circle. One by one, the elders spoke in voices, slow, deliberate, carrying the weight of generations. Finally, Sani rose, her weathered face proud beneath the firelight. Whatever she said drew murmurs of agreement, a reluctant nodding of heads. When the meeting ended, Nakai's eyes found Tessa's across the flames, steady, unreadable. She felt the heat of that look long after he disappeared into the shadows. Later, as she fed Kael and settled him to sleep, Sani entered her shelter carrying a bowl of stew and a small pouch of herbs. "What happened?" Tessa asked, her voice tight with dread. Sani sat cross-legged, her tone calm but grave. "Nakai tell tribe he want you as wife. Say you save his son. Say you have good spirit. Strong medicine." Tessa nearly dropped the bowl. He told them that. Before I even answered him, Sani's eyes twinkled with amusement. "He see answer in your eyes already, even if you do not. What did the council say?" "Much talking," Sani said with a shrug. "But in end they agree. You save Chief's child. That count for much." She hesitated, her face turning solemn. "Not all happy. Lonnie and her father Nash are angry, but they cannot fight Nakai without breaking tribe." Tessa set the stew aside, appetite gone. "I don't want to cause division among your people." "There is always division," Sani said simply. "Among Apache, among white men, same. Some hearts angry, some hearts kind. She looked down at Kyle, now fast asleep. But this one needs mother. And Nakai. He needs woman with gentle hand, strong spirit. Like you. When Sani left, Tessa sat in the darkness watching Kyle's tiny chest rise and fall. The truth settled deep within her. Nakai had risked everything to claim her before his people. The next move, the final decision, rested with her. Before dawn, the camp erupted in chaos. Shouts cut through the still air. Horses screamed. Tessa jolted awake to the sound of gunfire echoing off the canyon walls. "What's happening?" she gasped, clutching Kyle. Nakai appeared beside her, his face carved from stone. "The army," he said. "They found us. We move now." "How did they find this place? Someone told." His eyes darkened with fury. The name they both thought of hung between them, unspoken Lonnie. "Get ready," he ordered, striding away to direct his warriors. But they were too late. A crack of rifles split the air bullets, tearing through rock. A warrior fell. Then another. Screams followed. Horses reared, women scattered with children clutched to their chests. "Take him!" Tessa cried, thrusting Kyle into Sani's arms. "Get him to safety!" Sani didn't argue. She vanished into the tree line, the child tight against her. Tessa turned back to find Nakai amid the chaos, rallying his men, barking orders, firing from behind cover. Their eyes met across the smoke and dust. And in that instant, her choice became clear. "I can stop this," she shouted, running toward him. "Let me talk to them." Nakai shook his head fiercely. "Too late for talk. They won't shoot a white woman," she shouted over the gunfire. "I can buy you time." Before he could protest, a bullet struck the dirt near his feet, spraying dust into the air. Nakai dropped behind a boulder, firing back. "Tessa," he yelled. "Go with Sani!" But she didn't listen. Heart pounding, she sprinted toward the center of the camp, waving her arms. "Hold your fire!" she screamed toward the ridge. "I'm Tessa Crowe. I'm a white captive." The gunfire faltered for a heartbeat. Dust swirled around her as she raised her voice again. "I'm unharmed. Stop shooting." For the first time since her capture, Tessa wasn't a prisoner, nor a teacher from Boston, nor a woman divided between two worlds. She was simply one soul, standing against the fury of both, daring them all to listen. From the ridge above, a voice thundered down over the canyon. "Miss Crowe, stay right where you are. We're coming for you." Tessa froze, the sound slicing through the chaos below. She turned. Nakai stood across the camp, half shrouded by smoke and sun, his dark eyes locking with hers. His face held disbelief and a quiet, wounded understanding. He knew what her choice meant. "Go," she mouthed. "Take Kyle and go." For a fleeting moment, pain flashed across his features, raw and unguarded. Then the rumble of approaching horses shattered whatever might have been said between them. With one last look that held 1,000 unspoken words, Nakai turned and vanished into the pines after his people. Moments later, soldiers poured into the canyon, rifles, raised eyes scanning the smoke-filled air. They surrounded Tessa, some cautious, some triumphant. A young officer stepped forward, tipping his hat. "Miss Crowe, I'm Lieutenant Tay Cross. We've been tracking this area for weeks, looking for survivors from your wagon party." "How did you find me?" she asked, still standing amid the ruins of what had been her home. He hesitated. "A native woman came to Fort Bowie, claimed she could lead us to a white captive. Sounded like there was some disagreement among the band." "Lonnie." The name fell through Tessa's mind like a knife. Betrayal carried on soft words and army promises. "Are you hurt?" Tay asked, his eyes flicking to her buckskin dress. "Did they mistreat you?" "No," she said, lifting her chin. They saved me. The chief's son was ill. I cared for him. The lieutenant's brow furrowed, skeptical, but unwilling to argue. Well, you're safe now, ma'am. We'll take you back to Fort Bowie, and from there arrangements can be made to send you east. Safe now. The words echoed hollowly as soldiers dismantled what was left of the Apache camp. Safe when everything that had felt like safety had just vanished into the trees. 3 days later, Tessa sat in Colonel Ward Calhoun's office at Fort Bowie. The scent of ink and dust filled the air. She wore a borrowed blue dress, her golden hair pinned neatly beneath a bonnet, every trace of her desert life scrubbed away. To anyone else, she looked every bit the rescued lady from back east. Inside, she was torn clean in two. Miss Crowe, the colonel said, adjusting the stack of papers before him. The stage to Tucson departs at first light. From there, you'll catch the train east. The Army will cover your fare back to Boston. Thank you, Colonel, she said quietly. You've been very kind. He nodded, though uneasily. About your time with the Apache. I realize it may be hard to talk about, but any intelligence numbers, locations, leaders would be a great help. Tessa met his gaze without flinching. They could have killed me. They didn't. They let me live and care for a sick child. I won't help you hunt them down. The colonel's mouth hardened. They murdered your people, Miss Crowe. They've killed settlers, soldiers, men like those who rescued you. They're savages. Her voice trembled with restrained fire. And how many of them has the Army slaughtered, Colonel? How many women and children buried in this same desert? His jaw clenched. It seems your time among them has clouded your sense of right and wrong. Perhaps when you're back among civilized... He was cut off by a shout from outside. Boots thundered down the hallway and the door burst open. "Sir," a breathless sergeant cried. "Apache raiding party near the east wall. They've taken Mrs. Wynne and her baby." The colonel swore under his breath, grabbing his pistol. "Sound the alarm. Mount up a pursuit." As the fort exploded into motion, Tessa's heart leapt, not in fear, but hope. There was only one man bold enough to attempt such a raid, Nakai. In the confusion, she slipped from the office unnoticed, moving through the chaos toward the stables. Soldiers sprinted toward the eastern gate. No one paid attention to a lone woman heading west. At the smaller gate, a young guard, barely more than a boy, looked up as she approached, breathless. "Miss Crowe." "You should be inside, ma'am. There's Apaches about." She caught her breath, forcing urgency into her voice. "The colonel sent me to help deliver orders. Every man's needed. Lock this gate behind me once I go." The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Godspeed." The moment he turned, she slipped through, locking it behind her as promised, but not for the reason he thought. Her heart pounded as she climbed the ridge beyond the fort, scanning the horizon. Then she heard it, a low whistle, familiar as breath. There he was. Nakai astride his stallion, framed against the blood-red sunset. Even at that distance, she knew the set of his shoulders, the proud tilt of his chin. Without a second thought, Tessa gathered her skirts, tearing the hem for freedom, and began to climb. Her shoes were gone halfway up the slope, her hair tumbling loose around her face. When she reached the top, breathless and wild, Nakai watched her with guarded eyes. "There's no Mrs. Wynne, is there?" she asked, a breathless smile tugging at her lips. "No raid at all." He said nothing, but the faintest ghost of a smile curved his mouth, the kind that said everything words never could. A slow grin spread across Nakai's face. "Soldiers too easy to fool," he said, amusement in his low voice. "They see Apache and forget to think." "You risked everything," Tessa Crowe said, stepping closer to his horse, her pulse still racing. Nakai swung down in one smooth motion, standing before her. His eyes held the same fierce fire she remembered from the canyon, the kind that stole her breath. 3 days, he murmured. You owe me an answer." Instead of replying, Tessa reached up, pulling free the pins from her neatly arranged hair. The golden waves fell loose around her shoulders, catching the dying light. Slowly, deliberately, she unfastened the high collar of her borrowed dress, revealing the small leather pouch that rested against her collarbone, its beadwork faded, but carefully kept. "Sani gave me this before we were separated," she said softly, touching the medicine charm. "She told me it would protect my heart until I found my true path." Her eyes locked with his. "I found it." Understanding flared in Nakai's dark gaze, followed by a joy so fierce it nearly undid her. "You choose Apache life?" he asked quietly. "Choose Kyle, choose me, yes," she said without hesitation. "I choose you." In one motion, Nakai lifted her onto his horse and mounted behind her. His arm slid around her waist, drawing her against him, his warmth seeping through the thin fabric of her dress. "Kyle waits," he said, voice low against her ear. "He cries for his gold-haired mother." As they rode away from Fort Bowie, the fort's walls shrinking in the distance, Tessa felt no regret. Each hoofbeat carried her farther from the world that had once defined her, and closer to the life she knew was truly hers. The desert stretched before them, harsh, untamed, magnificent. It mirrored the love that had taken root between them, defiant and raw, bound by something stronger than fear. "I'll teach you the Apache ways," Nakai said, as they rode beneath the setting sun. "And you'll teach our son the words of your people. He'll walk between worlds." Our son Tessa repeated softly the words strange and sweet on her tongue. As crimson light washed over the sands, she leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The road ahead would not be easy. 2 worlds would judge them, danger would follow. But in that moment, such worries seemed small compared to the bond that had been forged in fire and faith. "I love you," she whispered in careful Apache. Nakai's arm tightened around her waist. She felt rather than saw his smile as he answered in slow, deliberate English, "And I love you, my gold woman, until the stars fall from the sky." 3 weeks later, under the full moon that rose above their hidden mountain camp, Nakai and Tessa were wed in an Apache ceremony. Sani presided, calling upon Mother Sky and the spirits of their ancestors to bless the union. Kyle watched from the arms of an elder, dark eyes bright with curiosity. Tessa knelt before him in the ceremonial buckskin that had once belonged to Seri Kyle's birth mother. Not every face in the circle was warm. Lonnie and Nash had chosen to leave rather than witness the joining, but enough stayed to honor her. When Nakai placed the beaded wedding necklace around her neck, Tessa looked up into the face of the man who had once been her captor and was now her husband. In his eyes, she saw not the fierce warrior feared by settlers, but the man who had risked everything his tribe, his life, to give her a choice. She had crossed the line that divided 2 worlds and found herself remade no longer a captive, not quite Apache, not quite the woman she had been. She was something new, a bridge between peoples who only knew each other through blood and war. As Nakai drew her into his arms, sealing their vows with a kiss, the mountains stood silent witness. Around them, firelight flickered over faces weathered by wind and time. Above the stars burned bright, ancient, endless watching. For the first time, Tessa felt whole, not as a woman lost between 2 cultures, but as one who had chosen her own way, a way carved from courage, love, and the will to belong. And in Kyle's small, trusting face, she saw the promise of something greater, a future where love might bridge even the deepest divides. It was a fragile hope, perhaps, but hope was where every new world began. Would you have made the same choice as Tessa Crowe, leaving behind comfort and certainty for love that defied every rule? Or would you have turned back toward the safety of what you knew? If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.